life. It's very interesting to see how we're kind of adapting and evolving to have these like parasocial relationships and feel connected to people that you've never actually met. Like, I've had dreams about like a YouTuber. It was like a friend that like we were hanging out and like I thought it was so cool. Like, I'm hanging out with my YouTube friend in my dream. That's very strange. like to have this weird parasocial friendship with someone, and to like feel like you would actually be friends in real life. But yeah, this one's kind of a perplexing thing for me. Anything else before I move on?
I just was thinking now, another thing I think we can all relate on is having like a work friend.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're at work and you have that one person who you love to work with, but like you might not hang out with them like ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't just see yourself hanging out with them. Like, if you're going out for coffee, like it just seems like awkward.
Yeah.
Whereas at work, you have so much in common at work. Like, you know what's talked about, you know, like the drama, the tea, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas outside of work, you don't even know that much about each other. You just know, you know about work, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why so it's like when I'm comparing that to the video game topic, it's kind of the same thing. It's like you both know so much about video games, you probably wouldn't meet them in person or care to, well, maybe you would, but it's not as important because the whole reason you met them was to play that video game.
Mm-hmm.
So you might not really care to meet them in person because that's not the point of meeting them, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My brother met someone, like, he had a friend in Chicago who he met. They only played video games, and then they met in person, and it was really interesting to see how their like real life dynamic was. Like, you know so much about each other in this one aspect, but you know like not a lot about each other in these other aspects. Yeah, it's really interesting to see how our needs and our ways of getting them met are evolving.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still, my bias is still that I don't really feel connected. Like, I guess I have dreams about YouTuber, but whatever. I don't really feel connection with people online like that, but I'm open to the possibility that other people are able to feel some sort of like closeness or like meaningful relationship in a way that enhances their life.
So, I had an encounter for a few seconds, less than a minute, with a person that I had known online with a very troubled background, fetal alcohol syndrome, and all sorts of things that you don't really want to know about someone. But anyway, I was coming to Seattle, that's where she lived. So she came to my hotel lobby, and we just sort of said hi to each other, and then went back up to the room. And that was really all that she needed. She didn't want more than that. It was good to like see that I really existed.
You're a real person.
The other thing that happened is in my life, I sort of identified this person who's the polar opposite of me, and we talked about this being polar opposites. But think about meeting a person like that. Do you think you'd enjoy it? Probably not. And so, Amir and I went on this trip, and it was really something. And it was a sort of test of, what kind of psychological experience. There was really bad weather. We got stuck at the airport on the way back. And, Amir still said that because we were traveling together, it was a memorable and positive experience, all these strange things that happened.
He loves talking about that story.
Yeah. No, it certainly is a unique story.
Yes. So those are some of the like things that have surprised me or kind of challenged my assumptions about what AI could actually do for improving flourishing. They seem really. It seems very limitless what could be done, and that's both exciting and kind of spooky to me. I'll then go on to talk about some of the challenges. I'm a bit of an antagonist. I like to play the devil's advocate a little bit, so bear with me. So let's say we have all these great things, you know, we can look at diagnostic things and tell everything about a person, and we can help people with their problems by giving them an AI to talk to, but there are still a lot of limitations to using technology like this, right? Currently, we still don't really know how to navigate these privacy issues. Like the amount of data that AI can collect about a person just by looking at their retina, like how do we make sure that that is stored safely? How do we make sure that people actually trust these technologies in order to let them be used on them or with them? You see a lot of headlines like this where maybe people are kind of sowing seeds of doubt about the safety of AI and whether these big technologies can be trusted or not. And I don't really know, like I have my own feelings about whether I trust AI or not, and I feel like it's a very personal issue. Like I can see people landing on all sides of that spectrum of feeling like they don't care, you know, give it all my data, I don't care, whatever. And then other people who would feel really uncomfortable interacting or sharing any of their personal information with AI.
And it's funny, I thought of when I was in France last summer, and we had very limited data. So we would, every time there was like free Wi-Fi somewhere, me and my cousin, we would like quickly get that free Wi-Fi, right? And we didn't think much of it. But our supervisor, who was from Italy, she was kind of supervising us, and when she found out that we were using the free Wi-Fi, she was freaking out. She goes, "What are you doing? Why are you using the free Wi-Fi?" And we're like, "What's wrong with it's free Wi-Fi?" Like,
Yeah.
and she's like, "No, like that. This is how they like track you. This is how the government like this is bad. Like, don't do that. Like, are you crazy?" And we're like, like "You're just something in France that's like." They're like, "No, like you never get free Wi-Fi. That's not. You don't do that. You get data." And we're like, "Okay, all right,
Yeah.
okay." It was just like so different to see how some people perceive free Wi-Fi and how others see it.
And like how do you balance that? Like how did you balance that? Did you continue using free Wi-Fi?
Yeah,
Okay.
we just told her it's fine. She got used to us. There was a
Yeah.
lot of things that bothered, like that we would like. She was very had a very strong personality.
Yeah.
So she had a very strong opinion about a lot of things. We just kind of like brushed it off. We're like, "Oh, you're fine." And then she got used to us. She was like, "Oh, you Canadians."
Yeah.
She got used to us. So yeah, we would just keep using it. She's like, "Oh."
So, you know, there's also the opposite side when these things work too well. Like before the AI boom, there were Japanese teenagers spending all their time in their room, right, with their, you know, computer, just occasionally coming out for meals, never going anywhere, no life outside of their room. And now with AI apps, it's even worse, right? More things that are keeping them in the room. So from their point of view, it may be fine.
Yeah,
but
they
I
can't
don't
get
know
enough.
that the parents and the rest of the family feel that way.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see the whole spectrum of people's opinion about it. I'm cautious. I've never downloaded TikTok because I'm like, I don't trust it. But that's just me. The other thing, or another thing about AI that is really challenging to work with is what I've called the weird bias. So as we know, AI relies on data to start making predictions, start making connections, and if we look back at look at the kind of research data that we have traditionally generated and that would then be accessible to artificial intelligence to learn from, it's very biased towards Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic societies, right? Even within these societies, it's very whitewashed, very male-dominant, and we know logically that this doesn't actually represent everyone. It doesn't represent how people in other cultures live. It doesn't represent, people within our culture, how they live and experience life. So there's this wonderful researcher named Joy who tried to kind of test the limitations of just very simple facial recognition technology. She said that she was at a conference in, I think, Hong Kong or something, and they were trying to show off this cool robot that was would interact with you, and it wouldn't interact with her, and she couldn't understand why. And then she realized that it's because the robot didn't recognize her face. It didn't see her face as a face because it hadn't been trained to look at different facial structures, to look at people with darker skin tones. And so go watch this TED Talk, it's really great. She's kind of trying to raise awareness about how if something so simple as facial recognition technology isn't able to accurately detect faces, what else are we missing? What other biases are we weaving into these algorithms and our technology? This is another author who kind of deals with the same sort of issue. This book is wild. I love it. It's called, I don't even have it on it's called Weapons of Math Destruction. And the subtitle is How Big Data Increases Inequality and Threatens Democracy. And she talks about how these models that are built for AI are really just as simplified as they can be. And she likens it to just making a toy version of the world, right? I think as technology is improving, we're getting more nuance and complexity into these algorithms, and as issues like this are brought up, people are taking more consideration of these issues, but it's still something to be aware of, right? It's still something to know that is definitely a blind spot in how these technologies can be created, and we can't just make it and kind of hope things will be okay. Incorporating diversity and incorporating nuance into these systems has to be a very deliberate and active process. Another big limitation of AI is its ability to show emotional intelligence. This is still something that is pretty uniquely human. It's getting better now with more nuanced neural learning, natural language processing, and understanding different tones and connotations of certain phrases and words. It's improving a lot, but really it's inconceivable that AI, as it stands today at least, could at all be empathetic, right? When we talk about empathy, we can talk about these 3 different types of empathy. Perhaps AI could be capable of cognitive empathy, where it understands that your grandma just died. When someone's grandma dies, it is sad, right? It might be capable of that, but AI doesn't feel things. It doesn't experience the complexity of emotion in the same way that real people do. So it's not able to, support people in that sort of meaningful way. Perhaps the Woebot that I already talked about could be capable of generative empathy, where it's your grandma just died, that is sad, go for a walk. Maybe it's capable of connecting the dots and saying this is a sad situation, here are some suggestions, but it's not, I don't think it's the same. I don't think it's the same yet, at least. this still seems to be an aspect of interaction and support that still remains really uniquely human. Kind of related to that is, so this is my women's studies background coming out, I'm sorry, standpoint epistemology. So this theory posits that there's some knowledge that we can only really obtain through experience. So when you take your first women's studies class, they'll explain this and they'll talk about this metaphor of the blind man and the elephant. And they talk about how, like in this metaphor, the different people are located on different parts of the elephant. And so to them, elephant means different things, right? To the person who's touching the trunk, maybe elephant is actually more similar to a snake. But to the person touching the belly, it's more similar to a wall or something. AI isn't really able to, like how can you wrap up these nuanced experiences, right? Like how my experience of sadness or of joy is probably different than your guys' experience of sadness or joy. Our childhood experiences have taught us different things, right? How can you capture that and tend to that in like a healthcare context, a mental health context, with just artificial intelligence? Another women's studies term that I love is intersectionality. So this kind of refers to how all of our, we call it social locations, so like your age, your race, your sex, gender, how all of that kind of puts you into this unique spot to experience life in a different way. And I'm not sure how artificial intelligence could really conceive of those differences, of how someone who, you know, has had certain experiences or has certain background might need nuanced support or, you know, might have difficulties with certain things emotionally or spiritually, or, you know, all of these different dimensions. AI also doesn't really have a moral compass aside from the one that we program it to have, which I think kind of is a good and bad thing. If we come up with ideals, you know, let's say we use the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to make all AI Canadian, right? Like, this is what we stand for as Canadians, this is what it is. Then it seems like it could be kind of unbiased and like a really good police officer, or, you know, something that really upholds some sort of moral standard that we program it to. But unfortunately, we are biased in the things that we feed it. We have our own kind of spins on morality, right? That's why people still go to court and argue about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms or whatever. Like, that's why we can't all interpret it exactly the same way. So it's really hard to use artificial intelligence to help people have some sort of like moral compass or moral conduct. This is very blurry, but I liked the visual. Kind of along with this moral dilemma is that we really, like, our morals really do depend on our cultural contexts, right? The family that you grew up in, the things that are part of your culture. It's not just these superficial things like how you dress or what you eat. It's really these like nuanced beliefs that you have about the world, how you feel about your own emotions, how you feel about death, you know, like how I can't imagine there being like an AI doctor that can totally look at a person and understand in the same way that a person could, like, oh, this person is from this religious faith, so they feel like you shouldn't be able to end people's lives, but this person is agnostic, so they don't really care, whatever. I think it would be hard for an AI doctor to do something like that. So, now that I poo-pooed on AI, but also told you how awesome it could be, I think the concept that sits best with me for understanding how to kind of integrate these things is collaborative intelligence, which isn't this like mind-boggling thing. It's very straightforward, right? That we should really think of AI as like a teammate, and that we shouldn't force AI in places where it doesn't belong, but it can be this really cool and exciting and helpful tool to help do other things. It can help kind of foster new ideas for us. It can offset or offload some work from us. And it can really be seen as like a collaborator instead of just like I don't know, I get worried when I see headlines that are like, AI is going to do this. It's not true. Like, AI with us is doing this. I feel like there's a lot of discourse that misses the whole point, that we're making this for us and with us, and not just as this like thing that's going to take over and not include us anymore. So I really want to emphasize how important it is to see it as a partner. Yeah, and here's just a little table of the different types of intelligence that AI and humans are capable of. Humans can, I'll just focus on the human side, but like humans can learn things quickly after like maybe 1 or 2 interactions, whereas AI needs a lot of repetition, a lot of data. AI is able to kind of spit back things that it's already been given, whereas humans are more suited to come up with new things and abstract things and bring in all of these different concepts to form something new. AI is more like 1 + 1 is always 2 kind of stuff. And then AI is improving a lot, but it's still kind of limited on how much, like they call it sensory input, like how much different types of stuff it can incorporate. Whereas us as humans, like when you're engaging with someone, you're not just listening to the words that they say, you can hear their tone of voice, you can read their body language. We're able to incorporate a lot more information than AI currently is able to do. And so, going back to this example of the clinical trial brainstorming that Dr. Soles and I are involved in, it's really useful that this young researcher is creating this model to help predict the ideal patient, right? But we then need to work with that model and kind of give it a more human side of things. Like, if we approach these patients, what kind of support do they need to feel comfortable and safe engaging with this potential trial? How would they and their families feel about having a kid pygmy? No, kid pygmy, a pig kidney. How might they feel about like the publicity of it? And so AI and humans can really work together on all of these fronts that we've talked about to create a much more holistic human flourishing. And something that was in that TED Talk that you watched was this idea of keyboard liberation, and I thought that that was a really brilliant point where it can be this collaborative effort. AI maybe handles that quantitative data stuff that is so draining for healthcare practitioners to be involved in, and can instead, free up people to do more of that emotional labor, to connect with people and to have them have like more meaningful relationships with their healthcare practitioners. And now I'm on to questions. Do you have anything you'd like to say first?
So, when you think of nuance, it actually works both ways. Not only do we need to work with AI so it has more nuance, but in those instances where AI actually knows more about the subject than we do, the nuance is on the side of the AI, right? And so we can learn from them. And there's going to be a lot of that, of AI tutors, and probably those tutors will be essentially free and, very, very skilled. So.
Yeah, I see that more as like cognitive nuance.
Yeah.
Like that is this depth of understanding and detail, but that's still distinct from living, like what it, the nuance of the human experience.
So what I've started thinking about, every human being has unrecorded history that may be an important part of their history, but is not written down anywhere, is not on the internet. Like my senior year in college, I studied cellular slime molds, and they're a kind of unique creature with a kind of intelligence that doesn't use brains, right? And yet, because there was no paper published, there's really no evidence that I ever did that, even though it sort of shaped my view of the world and everything. So when you came along and said, what should I send you the link? Yeah. But I think everybody has that, and that's really what AI is missing if it's only programmed on what's on the internet, is those things that every human being knows, that are maybe their most interesting stories, actually, but are not written down anywhere. That's what AI is missing. And so, in a sense, they can't have a complete view of the world without knowing that stuff, right? The kind of unpublished things that every human being has. But probably it may be hard to enforce that, but that could be a thing that gives us a role. Even when AI gets smarter and smarter and smarter, they're still lacking that data that comes from humans and is not written down anywhere, the unrecorded history that every human has.
And I find it interesting. I consider myself fairly perceptive and intuitive, and so sometimes you can't predict what someone's life experience is like exactly, right? But if you meet someone and they're talking a little bit, you can kind of feel like, okay, you don't have a good relationship with your mother. Like you can kind of intuit some of these life experience things,
right,
just from your own experiences, or from, kind of experiencing them as they are. And I feel like I don't know that AI can do that, like to just experience a person and then to intuit those kinds of things about them.
It's one of the most mysterious thing about human beings. If you just consider two things, tattoos and cell phone access. In some families, the phones are shared and freely shared. I mean, maybe you've got 5 phones and 5 people, but it's not always the same people, and in other families you would never do that because there's so many undiscussed secrets that every family member has. They could never share their phone, right? And tattoos, there are young people, at least in the past eras, growing up with, you know, maybe striking tattoos that their parents know nothing about. So every time that they like put on a bathing suit or something, trying to strategize putting it on in such a way that the, you know, tattoos that their parents don't know about won't show and so on. How would you explain that to an AI? Because it's so crazy. You know, they'd say, well, okay, give me the usual rules then. You know, like if there's 5 people in a family and they have 5 phones and they just randomly share them, or do they never do that? Or and what's the difference between the families that, you know, have such absolute barriers of secrecy between each family? And it's because we're not inbred species, right? If we were all genetically identical, maybe we would be more similar.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like how can it get that subtlety?
Yeah.
Because it just wants to look for patterns, and there are very complicated patterns.
But, you know, when it gets beyond what humans can understand, probably AI will be able to deal with that. So they can then teach us, you know, okay, well, you humans can't figure out how to tell the difference between a family where the cell phones are just freely shared and everybody can, but we have discovered the following things, you know, and because they're able to sort of have a more, I don't know, universal vantage point, see something obvious that humans would miss. Like if you look at the AI moves in the game of Go, you know, that are like things, no human player would ever make a move like that. But it makes the playing much more beautiful and so on. It really enhances the game. So that possibility exists in every human endeavor, right? That when AI reaches the point of being much better than we are, that entity, whatever it is going to become much more interesting than it is now, because there are all sorts of other ways to do it.
Would you like me to ask you guys some questions now? Do you want to talk to me? Maybe I'll skip to the second one, because we're kind of talking about that a little bit. How do you think we can make sure, like as we're starting to incorporate artificial intelligence into, I hope you understand what I mean when I say like flourishing. Like to me, that's what modern medicine is actually all about. We care about your vitals, we care about, you know, your diet, but I think we're getting to this point now in medicine where we're seeing like we want you to be living like a full life. We want you to feel supported and valued and all of these beautiful things. As we're starting to incorporate artificial intelligence into the equation in these various ways and with these big caveats, how do you think we can ensure that like the human element of medicine is still protected?
I think there has to be a change in, like a slow change in medical training. So as AI becomes better at diagnostics and like diagnosing and I don't know, like doing lab results and whatever, that gives, I feel like, medical practitioners more time to be with the patient and offer those supports, and that's like the human element. So this way we have more time for like doctor-patient interactions rather than spending so much time figuring out the diagnosis. Like if an AI can just diagnose, then you have all this extra time that can be dedicated to that humanistic element of like relationships and support, mental health care, therapies. Like I think there's like a lot of, even in any, especially chronic illnesses, like patient therapy is really important for their recovery. So more attention to that, I think, would be helpful and improves healthcare, not only that protects the human element.
I agree, yeah. How do you think that, like, do you think it would be clunky for, you've got your AI on the computer and then you're talking to your patient. Do you think there's a way to kind of humanize the results somehow? Like how do you translate the things that the AI is spitting out to the patient? Do you think that the physician will play a role in kind of interpreting that and like humanizing it? Or do you think that patients might prefer to just know kind of the raw data of it, if that makes sense? Like, okay, it says I have this blood pressure, I have this, that, and the other thing, I'm at an increased risk of blah, blah, blah for a stroke. Like, how would you prefer for that to go? Do you want the physician or healthcare provider to kind of act as a middleman, or do you think that patients would prefer to engage with that directly?
I think that when you have a patient who is high in anxiety, I think that having something like that just spits the facts is not preferred. That's kind of the point of having like a physician or someone that's able to tell you and able to kind of sugarcoat it, not in a way that's like making it seem less important, but in a way that's going to keep the patient from like stressing when they may not need to stress. Like there may be ways to help cope or help the patient, but with just spitting out facts, it might cause patients a lot of stress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to, like, even as someone who has a background in science, like when I read, oh, you have an increased probability of blah, 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 like, what does that actually mean? Like, does that mean I'm gonna get it? Does it mean I'm gonna get it in 10 years? Like, what? It can be really hard to understand and interpret those kinds of results.
I like the emotional point that you made also, that sometimes having those results might cause anxiety, so having someone to break it down or provide that emotional support, because as you like, and kind of supplement the AI response. Because right now it's as you said, the AI can't really understand like the background of the individual, what they've been through, and speak to them in a way that would like calm them down. So with each person, you're not going to speak like to all of your patients in the same way. You take into consideration their background, their age, what they've been through, which the AI wouldn't really know, and their also the subtleties that you were mentioning that they wouldn't know. But at the same time, I think it can sometimes having an expert explain the results might also confuse a patient. Like a lot of the times, as you said, like reading scientific literature, I will actually ask ChatGPT, can you summarize this or explain this word or explain this concept, and it provides like complementary information to it that helps me understand the paper better. So sometimes it can be helpful to like maybe not have the physician explain it. I think a combination of both is probably best.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is really important. The like patient taking it into their own hands, right? Like you yourself are taking the initiative to read more about it and understand it, whereas I think there's probably a population of people who will just not know what it means and just stay spooked about it, like they...
I think it would be cool to have like it give you the results, as you said, but then maybe provide a simpler explanation, and then the physician could provide both. So if you didn't understand his explanation, you have the AI one, and then you also have the human component or element where they're going to comfort you with whatever the situation is.
Do you think, this kind of goes to my last question, but do you think that AI will be seen as some sort of like all-knowing authority? That, like, how do you think that will impact how people make decisions about their healthcare? Let's say that it's giving you this result saying that you need a very intense surgery of some sort, a very like, you know, physically demanding surgery. According to the AI, it's very important that you get this surgery in a timely manner, blah, blah, blah. How do you think, like, do you think people will put a lot of authority in that AI and like feel like they have to do that because the all-knowing one says that that's what they should do? Or do you think that people will still feel comfortable kind of going against it or challenging it or looking for alternatives?
So you know, it goes beyond medicine when you think about, Yuval Noah Harari talks about how human culture will be wrecked because in the future we will trust, you know, machines to make all the big decisions, who to marry, where to live, so on, right? And so my argument is that there's that much extra intelligence to go around. Humans will adapt, will do all sorts of wonderful things with it. Our lives will be richer, our culture won't be wrecked, it'll be much better than, you know, today. But so a lot of the questions that you're posing are not restricted to medicine. When we reach the point where there's kind of the AI machine that you're asking a medical question, there are other comparable machines that you're asking about everything else in your life. Yeah.
But do you think that people will, like, how do you think people will actually engage with that? Will they see it and, you know, like, well, it must be right because it's AI, I feel obligated to go along with it?
Well, I think the data is the data, right? People will resist it at first, right? But then the people who marry somebody that the AI wouldn't have recommended, then over time it becomes apparent that that was a really bad choice, whereas all of the AI selected mates, those are sort of made in heaven and stuff. So that's what people predict, that sure, people would be skeptical and, you know, resist it at first, but it will be obvious that things turn out better when you do what the AI says.
I think just in general too, like, people are gonna either, like, I don't think there is a straight answer to that, just because a lot of people now, before and in the future, will always trust technology, will trust AI because they just always will. But then you'll have people who are completely opposed to that, who don't trust technology whatsoever and just want to speak to like an actual human being. So you're always gonna have some people who will like agree and will like trust it, some people who will completely oppose it and won't.
Do you think that there will be, like let's say I'm a physician and I'm employing AI, and I'm trying to convince, like, the AI is saying you need this surgery, and you're resisting. Do you think that there's going to be, like, ramifications or, like, pushback for people who resist technology as technology becomes even bigger?
Well, this is it, because this reminds me of COVID, right? Like, just like with COVID, you had people who were all for the vaccine or who believed in COVID, like that COVID was even a thing. But then you had people who didn't believe in it, like, at all, like, not in COVID, not in the vaccine, not even wearing masks. They were completely opposed to all of it, right? So even like what you're saying, I think that there's gonna be people who are completely opposed to it, who will just reject it completely.
Yeah, it'll be complicated. Like, how do you ensure that they're still able to make free choices, right? Like, you can't force them to get this surgery even though 10 different AI things say that they should be getting this surgery. but you still need to like ensure that they are living well, right? Like it's going to be very interesting to see how this new sort of authority, like the authority of authorities, weighing in on healthcare decisions could impact the dynamic between.
There's always a bigger, dimension to this.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can think of Rich Sutton's idea when he taught last year, a completely automatic world
Mm-hmm.
where it's fine-tuned for human flourishing, but with AI's enhanced intellect, it knows what's good for us better than we do, right? Sometimes you're probably not going to like that, just like when your parents or somebody else in your life tell you you should do this because it's good for you. You may not believe it, right?
Sometimes I'm a little stubborn. When someone says, like, you need to do this, I can't tell you how much I don't want to do it then. I don't know. I like the marriage idea. That's a very interesting. Do you guys think that you would marry someone that AI, like, let's say they give you 5 people to choose from. Do you think that you would consider those people?
There's a lot more things to consider than just, like, if that was like one, there's so many things in a person. I feel like that when it comes to marriage, that just starts to complicate things even further. You know what I mean? Like just that element in a person, I feel like is so small. There would be other things that could overpower that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I feel like I would maybe be open to meeting the people.
Yeah.
And then getting to know them and seeing if I actually think it's a good fit. But I don't think I'd be comfortable just like meet you at the altar, like let's go. Like that seems. But I could see people doing that. I feel like some people would just trust it and want to make it work. And some people wouldn't even want to meet them.
Also, I mean, people talk about how crazy, dating is now. There used to be rules, there used to be a few things you could count on. Now you can't count on anything, So this could fix all that, right? You don't have to do any dating at all. You just do this, Yeah. But it might take a lot of the fun out of it, don't you think?
Fun or heartbreak, one of the two.
Fun or heartbreak.
Yeah.
Yes. Both, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't actually think things would change that much on the human side. I think it's pretty much the same thing. It's just a different authority that's giving you answers. So even when a physician tells you to take a surgery, there's people who aren't gonna take it.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're like as humans. I don't think it's gonna change our way of thinking. It might change our lifestyle, but not the way we approach decision making.
I like that point actually. Yeah. Because I'm thinking of like AI being this like mega authority, right? It knows so much. Like we have to trust it. But you're right. There are people who already don't
Because
listen.
we kind of already have those social rankings in society.
Yeah.
And people aren't gonna, like everyone said, like if it's your mother or whatever,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily listen, and I don't think that's gonna change just because it's not a human form. It's the same as like I don't know if you Google something or you see something on social media, I'm still skeptical. Like if I read it, I'm like, okay, probably true, but there's a chance that it might not be.
I like that point.
Yeah, when you think of, conspiracy theories and all these weird things some people think, the strange thing in physician society, interaction between physicians, is you find all those things also represented there. You're sort of astounded that this physician that you're working with believes this. How is that possible? Yeah, so you would like to think that it's just like other people, and that no, doctors don't ever do that. But of course, some of the worst mass murderers and stuff have been, well-trained physicians who did great doctoring, and then something happened in their life, and they became a mass murderer. So, yeah, so we can't count on choosing any one profession and having that save you from everything. Yeah, unfortunately.
And that's kind of all the prepared stuff I have. My ideas have mostly been covered. Does anyone have any questions or want to tell me cool things you've learned lately in the course?
So maybe I've just posed to you the following thing that has a comical sort of urgency. When you think of other urgent things that you know, they're urgent because something bad is going to happen if you don't do something. This is sort of the opposite, that we're barreling towards something very good happening, but maybe it's going to happen not taking into account at all the articles that have been written about it and so on. And this is medical jargon for the patient out there in the world who lives someplace where there is no local medical care, but they have a working cell phone, right? And so they can get high quality medical information. The only problem is medical terms, medical jargon that they don't understand. Within the next year, I think the makers of generative AI apps are going to realize that this is something that the app user wants. They want to be able to translate from jargon to regular speech, right? And so there are two things. There's a literature about 5 years old of how to categorize medical jargon, which terms should stay and which ones should obviously go, and that sort of thing. So there's a real science in these people's articles. But I could see in the next year this jargon fixer thing on phones everywhere in the world being set up, paying no attention whatsoever to anything that's ever been written about it. Just that they're reacting to what the phone user wants, right? And they fix that, right? So what's urgent then is sort of get a word in edgewise in that process. Say, well, these people over here have been studying this and they get all these articles and so on. And so in setting this up on the phone, you need to take what they've done into account.
Yeah.
But isn't it also true that there's like, there is medical grand rounds is coming Friday, has to do with what is the role of medical journals in the world. Do they have an important role to play, or have they been sidelined by other things? And it's a real question, because what I've just posed to you, you might find that the medical jargon translator that finally exists in 2026 on phones around the world is really perfect, even though it never paid any attention to that guy's articles. But it's actually better because, I don't know, it just is. And so publishing articles doesn't mean that AI needs to consult you. And in fact, you all encountered Rich Sutton because he teaches in this course. The most well-known thing he's ever done is called the Bitter Lesson, and it's this very short idea. Every major advance in computing and AI that has benefited human beings has never ever involved the computer learning how the human does it first. It's just pure computation. Okay, you're a computer with certain skills, and we have this problem we want you to solve. And it can do it without knowing how humans do that thing. and consistently do it. And it doesn't need to know how so all the work that's gone into humans doing it is really not as valuable as you might think. And that's Rich Sutton's bitter lesson. It's worth keeping in mind, and it's so different from what you would like to think that, you know, computers can't do anything very impressive without knowing how humans do it, right? They can't. You know, they're just copying us. That is absolutely not true. When they succeed at these major things, it has nothing to do with trying to do it the way humans do it. And in fact, that kind of distracts them. You know, it pulls them away from the main thing that they're trying to do, solving the problem. Yeah.
That is very interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so I'd say we've solved all the problems
All
of the
the world's
world
problems today.
in 80 minutes, once again. And also, thank you for setting up for the social event. And so